right, we are continuing on with the sermon series, God and Your Job. But you may notice that there's nothing up here. It's because today is about Sabbath. I guess you could say God and your job, recognizing what your job is and what God's job is, and not trying to play God and wearing yourself out, but being the person that God made you to be. You could call it being a human being instead of just a human doing, right? We like to get our value from what we do all the time instead of who God made us. And Sabbath or Sundays or whatever day you decide to take your rest is a time where we can just be and rely on God. And so that's why I took all of the elements of work off the stage because I don't want to think about that so much this morning. We'll talk about that a little bit still, but about the opposite end of that coin, the rest side. And that's important for your job too. You know, when I was in high school, we used to hike in the Adirondacks a lot. And one time I was hiking, and when we would get separated from people, we would yell Marco and wait to hear Polo back, and then we'd know because, you know, it's pretty thick once you get up to a certain point where it's just pine trees growing. You can't see anything. And so my brother was missing, and we yelled Marco, 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 and no one yelled back. And so we went back, and along the way there had been this rock on the path that was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 feet wide and 8 feet tall and 8 feet across. It was a boulder, and there was a path that went around this side and a path that went around this side. And all of us chose one path or the other, not Josh. Josh decided, you get in a rhythm when you're hiking, you get moving. He decided, I'm going to climb over this rock. Why go left or right? I'm just going to keep on going straight. Well, we had a 50-pound external frame backpack on the back of each of us. Big square thing. And so he gets up to the top of the rock, and I don't know how Josh does it, but he ends up on his back on the top of this rock, and the pack's so heavy he can't get off, and if he was to roll, he'd fall 8 feet either way. So when we come back to seeing Josh on this little boulder in the middle of this path, sitting on his back in the sun on the top of the rock, unable to move. He's like 16, 17 years old. And the perspective that we had was wonderful. Because from our perspective, we can say, Josh, why didn't you just walk around the rock? Why didn't you just go around this way or that way? But Josh's perspective, his head's down hiking, there's a rock in front of him. He didn't see the path that went on either way. He just decided, I guess I have to climb over this rock. And then he gets stuck up at the top of the rock, and he has to sit there for 5 minutes going, well, that was dumb. And sometimes it's good to get a better perspective on our life, right? Our head is down and we're going and we're plowing through things, and sometimes we take on challenges or obstacles that God had provided a very easy way around, but we were so in a rhythm of work, 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 go, go, go. We never stopped to step back and take perspective on our life. And sometimes Sabbath can be that. Sometimes our head is so much in the game of our work that we never take a time to step back and get perspective and see the bigger picture and say, the answer is really simple. I was just going so hard, I couldn't see it from where I was. Perspective makes a big difference. Before I get started, a lot of times in your life, it's easier to notice the things that are there and that are out of place, than to notice the things that aren't there at all. You ever play those games, what's missing from this picture? And sometimes it's really hard to tell. A door's missing, there's a staircase that goes to nowhere, or there's a tire missing on that car. A lot of times our eye goes to things that are out of place or don't belong, but we don't see things that are missing. And maybe you're wondering, there's something not quite right in my life, and maybe it's something that's missing, not something that's extra, and maybe it's the Sabbath. If we look around in our culture, and we have a culture that has all the food, all the clothing, all the shelter we could ever want, and we're still the most anxious culture on the planet. We're full of anxiety and worry and fret, and we work in a panic. We're never satisfied. We have the best health care, we have the best food, and a lot of times we are a very, very sick culture because we work ourselves and worry ourselves into the ground compared to what God created us to be. It's also amazing that we live longer than people have since the flood. We have the best health care, but we still don't have enough time to spend with family or friends. Our schedules are still too busy, even with all this time-saving devices that we have. I think maybe there's something missing in our culture, and that's what I want to talk about this morning. Oh, there's Josh. I'm going to show that picture. There's Josh. That's that hike. He has a smaller backpack on there. But I said at the beginning of our sermon series that the first thing we knew about God is in the beginning God. Right? In the beginning he was eternal. The second thing we learned about God is that he works. He created. He developed. He made the world. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. And then this was the verse I started with, Genesis 2:2. And on the seventh day, after 6 days of creating, God had finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all of his work that he had done. That's the third thing we learn about God from the Bible, that he has a Sabbath. He made a Sabbath. I want you to think about this. Who remembers what day man was made on? People. Day 6. So here, God makes people on day 6. What's the first full day of human existence? Rest, the Sabbath. That's the first day that God made, was resting. It's a lot like the first years of our life, right? Resting. So God makes man, he puts him in the garden where there is work. There is work, and it's not hard work yet, right? We're not eating from the sweat of our brow. It's just enjoying the productivity that God created us to do. But on the very first day, he starts us off with Sabbath. And it's not that God needed to rest, right? God doesn't need to rest. Psalms 121, 2-4 says, "My help comes from the Lord who made the heavens and the earth, and he will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep." God didn't rest on the seventh day because he was tired from the work that he had done, but because he decided to make a divine pattern for these beings that he just created. And with these beings he created, he said, I designed in them sleep. I designed in them that they had to rest every 7 days. He's setting that pattern. And that's why in the Ten Commandments, this is one of the Ten Commandments. As a matter of fact, if you were to take the volume of all 10 commandments, this takes up a third of the written volume of the 10 Commandments. The biggest portion by far. All the ones we usually think of, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not murder. It's longer than all the last 5 put together. This is what it says. It says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. Notice how work is a part of the command to rest. That's a command. 6 days you shall work. So for 6 days, you're working hard. You're gazelling like we talked about, right? You're putting everything you have. You're working as hard as you can. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. And on it, you shall not do any work. You or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock or your sojourner who is within your gates. For, going back to creation, in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that was in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. He's saying, the reason I'm telling you to do this is not to make you less productive or to bind something on you, but it's because this is the way God created you. This is the way God created the world. That 1 in 7 should be a day of rest. So what does the word Sabbath mean? It simply means to stop. Stop. Sabbath day means stop day. It can be kind of confusing for those of us who didn't grow up in church. So you need to stop, is what God is telling you. America, you need to stop as a command from God. 1 in 7, doesn't matter if it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday. If you have a day where you can stop, God created you to stop. You cannot continue go. So when you read a Sabbath rest, just think of the word stop. Sabbath just simply means stop. It means to be still and know that he is God. That's what the word Sabbath means. Exodus 34 says, 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest time you shall rest, even when it seems impossible. Even when you have a lot of work to do and things are piling up and it seems like if I stop today, I'm not going to get anything done. Even then, even when you have your grain crop or your corn crop, they're ready to harvest and you're afraid if you wait a day it might rain and rot, he says, even then, you rest. Because there is a principle. There is a principle that when you rest, 1 and 7, you're way more productive. Way more productive. When I was in college, my junior and senior year, I decided, even though I was preaching all day Sunday and doing youth ministry, that on Saturdays, from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, I was just going to rest. I was going to stop. I wasn't going to do homework. I wasn't going to do anything. And even though I was studying the Bible all week, I would just spend the time with friends, studying the Word of God. We prepare meals ahead of time. Sabbath takes some preparation. We get everything at the house clean, get some meals prepared, and we would just rest on Saturday. All 12 or 15 of us, and we thought, our workload at school is so hard, there's no way we could take one day with not doing any schoolwork and still pass our courses. But we were convicted and we did it, and you know what? All of our grades went up. All of our stuff got done quicker. We had more free time. You know why? Because we weren't that drained college student who was going 5 years without sleeping. We would sleep in on Sunday. We would rest and spend time together. We weren't just studying about God for tests. We were studying the Lord together and learning about Him. And that was a time of greatest growth in my spiritual life. And there is a principle that when you stop from work, the work you do is more productive. And this is not even just from the Bible. If you listen to self-help books and things like that, they'll tell you the exact same thing. If you think about it, think about our culture. You were designed, God designed you to spend 11 years of your life Sabbathing or stopping. If you take 1 and 7 times a whole year, it's 52 days in a year, times your whole life, 1/7 of your life is about 11 years. If you live to be 75, 77 years old. God made us. And the very first thing He told after He designed this body is, I designed this body even before the fall to rest 1 day in 7. Now, how much more after the fall? But even before the fall, this is the way God designed us, to rest 1 and 7. So He designed you in your lifetime to spend 11 years resting. And we don't do it. Now, you take 11 years of anything out of someone's life, education or health, it's going to change who they are. It's going to change their character, their integrity. It's going to change the health of our bodies. We subtracted 11 years of what God designed our bodies and our souls to need. And we wonder why this culture is full of anxiety and heart attacks and stress eating and obesity and all these stress-caused diseases. It's because God built a car, told us to change the oil every 7 days, and we haven't changed the oil our entire life. And we wonder why our car's not running right. If you want, the first thing, I work with farmers. The first thing they do? They have a chainsaw, check the oil, check the bar oil, make sure there's enough gas, make sure the blades are sharp, and then we go work. Because you know what? You can spend all day cutting with a dull chainsaw, and you're only going to get a quarter of the work done if you would have spent 15 minutes sharpening your chainsaw before you cut all day, right? Instead, we spend all week trying to cut with a dull chainsaw instead of spending a day sharpening ourselves. And that's how you be more productive at work. Think about this. Why did God invent sleep? God didn't sleep or slumber. It doesn't seem like the angels sleep. So when He made people, He invented this idea of sleep out of nowhere. It didn't exist before He made us. He made it so that we have to become helpless, unconscious, and blind every day, or we can't live. Think about how humbling that is. He made us shut down. We have to be completely unaware of our surroundings, completely helpless and blind, unconscious for 6, 8, 9, 10 hours every day. Every day. God designed that in us for a reason. He didn't do it for the angels. Doesn't seem like He doesn't do it for Himself. He does it for us. There's a couple of reasons. There's a couple of reasons God made us that way. First one is found in Ezekiel. This is a reason. This is God explaining why He designed the Sabbath, why He engineered that into creation. He says, moreover, I gave them my Sabbaths. That's a sign between me and them that people would know, wow, this guy really takes his time with the Lord seriously. He's not going to allow anything, vacation, work opportunities. He's not going to allow anything to interrupt his time with the Lord. That they might know that I am the Lord who sanctifies them. That's the other reason. to remember that it's God who sanctifies us. Now, the word sanctify, there's two things that happen when we come to the Lord. The first thing is we're saved. There's salvation. We're saved from hell. And then there's sanctification, where he begins to make us more holy and more righteous, more saint-like. And he says that part, that making you more like Christ, that helping you improve on your life, that's what I do. See, he says, I want you to stop one day out of 7 to remember that I'm God and you're not. To remember that all the stuff that happened in your life, ultimately it's me who's doing it for you, not you. You can stop for a day and the world's going to keep on turning. Nothing's going to fall apart. The sun's going to keep on burning because that's all God's job. It's not our job. And sometimes we take too much on and think, if I stop for even an hour, the world is going to fall apart. And he says, stop. Be still and know that I am God and you are not, and that you can stop and your world isn't going to fall apart. Matthew 18, didn't Jesus say this to us? He says, truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I think part of it is to remember that we're just like little children who need a nap time, who pass out and are helpless and get carried around on their daddy's shoulder. To remember that it's really our Father who's in charge of all these things, and to sleep peacefully the way children do. Remember that he's our Father and that we're just his child. That's another reason why I think he gave us the Sabbath. Listen to what Psalms 127 says about your work. It says, unless the Lord builds a house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over a city, the watchman stays awake in vain. If your job on Monday is to go and do construction work, unless God is doing it with you and through you, you're wasting your time. Unless, if you're a police officer, you're watching over children and keeping them safe, or you're a supervisor, unless God does it through you, you're wasting your time. You're doing it in vain. Unless God preaches this sermon, it's in vain. Unless God builds that car, drives that bus, fixes that sink, teaches that child, it's in vain. Whatever you do, God needs to be there working alongside you. It's in vain. It's a waste of time to rise up early and go to rest. If you're doing it eating the bread of anxious toil, if you're doing it out of anxiety, if you're seeking first, remember, seek first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added unto you. If you're doing it for what shall I eat or what shall I wear or how am I going to put my kids through college or pay the mortgage or the car, if that's the anxious, fretful, almost resentful toil that you're working through, you're wasting your time. Because God gives his beloved sleep. This was my favorite. I had a roommate in college. This was his favorite verse. It was the first Bible verse I think he ever memorized. Did it when he was in college. This was a guy who would stay up all night playing video games. And he'd be in class, he'd fall asleep, and the professor would bring him out. He'd say, Psalms 127:2, God gives his beloved sleep. And he'd go back to sleep. That was his favorite verse. Unfortunately for Dan, I think a better translation of this verse is that God gives to his beloved in his sleep. That even while you're sleeping, God is still giving good things to you. That you don't, yes, you work and you earn these things, but even while you're sleeping, God is still working on your behalf because he doesn't sleep. Even while you're sleeping, God's giving you rest. He's giving you breath. He's giving you a heartbeat. He's giving you all these things. And God gives to his beloved even in his sleep. Even if you take a nap on Sunday afternoon, God is still working on your behalf. You know God can do more in 5 minutes than you can in 5 years. I think you know that, right? I mean, Jesus took a Sabbath every single week, and he did more in 3 years than most of us are going to do in a lifetime. And if you decide in the morning, I'm going to take 10 minutes, and I'm going to have a quiet time, and I'm going to focus on this, and I'm going to pray to the Lord, that 10 minutes is more valuable than the rest of the day. Because don't you think while you're Sabbathing on the weekend or resting in the afternoon and focusing on the Lord, that God can't be working on your behalf? Maybe softening the hearts of clients or coworkers or bosses that you work with. Those problems that you can't seem to overcome, that you're thinking on, and you're stuck on your back on the top of the rock. God can't give you perspective and see the paths around the rock. That the 10 minutes you can spend with God and rest can be more valuable than the 10 hours you spend that day in work. God gives to his beloved in his sleep and working and building houses and watching over things and doing all those things out of anxiety and fret is a chasing after the wind. It's a waste of time. Psalms 37:7 says, "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently on him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his ways, or because of the wicked because of the man who carries out wicked schemes." Don't fret, don't worry about all these other things. Remember, we said that you have to choose, am I serving God or am I serving money, right? Am I here for my boss or am I here to serve the Lord? And the question is, the Lord says, this is how I made you. I want you to have a Sabbath unto me. At the end of the day, you need to rest and wait patiently in the Lord, and don't worry about all these other things because you're working for God, not for man. Psalm 73 says, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." We trust in him, not in our flesh and not our abilities to work. Ecclesiastes 5, listen to this verse. It says, "A man who works hard sleeps in peace." A man who works hard sleeps in peace. It's not important if he has little or much to eat, but a rich person worries about his wealth. He cannot sleep. You know what's amazing? That we have a restless culture in America. We can't sleep, we can't stop, we can't sit still for anything. We have this anxiety, this nervousness, and it's a good thing to be energetic, and it's a good thing to be active, and it's a good thing not to be lazy. I'm not saying that, but I think peace and joy and contentment is something to strive for, to be able to stop and rest and trust God. And I think, where it says a rich person is worried about his wealth, that can be interpreted a couple different ways. I think in America, some of us are worried about our wealth. What's going to happen? Stock market, car gets broken into, what's that noise, all these things, what's going to happen with the business I run. But I think a lot more often we're distracted by our wealth, by all these things we have to do, by our cell phones and our tablets and our televisions, by all these opportunities we have that we can't just sit still and be at peace with God. There's always this noise. That we don't sleep because we're staying up too late. Instead, we just need to turn the TV off and go to bed. And God will rejuvenate us. I think we can be distracted by our wealth. That on a weekend, we have so much money, what are we going to do this weekend? Let's go here and do this. Let's go to this amusement park. Let's do all these big things that take all this energy away from us instead of, what most of the world does. Well, let's love on our family together and have a picnic and spend time around the house and rest and be rejuvenated. Let's spend time together as a family and really talk to each other instead of just going to an amusement park or something. I think as rich people, we're very distracted by our wealth. That's part of why we can't sleep. I want you to think about this. If time-saving devices actually gave us more time, then we would be the least busy culture in history by far. If this idea is all these things, will give you more time, right? I mean, like you go to Africa and you're going to cook a meal, you got to take 2 hours to cook a meal. We cook a meal in 2 minutes in the microwave. You'd think then we have, 1 hour and 58 minutes of leisure time, right? That, Africans should be really, really busy all the time and we should have a ton of leisure time. But it's the opposite. We can do anything we want on our cell phone. We can look up any question in the world. We don't have the time calling people or going to the library. We have all these time-saving devices. We can drive anywhere we want to go. But if time-saving devices were the answer and not the distraction, then we would have all the leisure time in the world. But instead, when you ask somebody, how's your life? The answer is always the same as mine. Busy, busy, busy. I'm really busy. So what does Sabbathing look like? If we're going to say, all right, if I'm just going to take some time and I know that I'm never going to get any more time. We live longer than anybody else has lived since Noah, like I said, and we still don't have enough time in the day. If I'm just going to decide to make time, what do I actually do? What do I do on Sunday? Just sit on the couch all day? Well, I don't think that's exactly it, but Exodus 20, what we read before, says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. You do all these things. On the 6th day you shall labor and do all your work. On the 7th day you shall rest. It is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. So the first thing, if you say, okay, I'm going to take a Sabbath, the first thing, remember, is a Sabbath unto the Lord. It's not a Sabbath unto television. It's not a Sabbath unto hobbies. It's a Sabbath unto the Lord. That the primary goal is to be still and know that he is God, to rest in his presence, to commune with him, to be with him in worship and study, to spend time with your family and loving on your family and other people. That the purpose of a time of stopping is ultimately for the Lord. And remember what it says before, remember this, if entertainment was the key to improving work ethic, to finding joy and satisfaction and value in your work, then modern Americans aged 10 to 25 would be the hardest working generation in history by far, right? So if I was saying Sabbath, just sit around, play video games, watch TV, eat nachos, and do whatever else you do in Cheetos, if that was what the Sabbath was, then America would have it down, right? Because we do that every single night. We come home, Netflix, chill for hours, go to bed, wake up, go to work, come home, Netflix, chill. That's what we do. If that was the key, if that was what Sabbath was, we'd be set. But we obviously look at the results and say, no, that just encourages more and more and more and more laziness. And remember, we said there's a difference between recreation, which means recreation, recreating, or entertainment, or escapism, feeding the flesh, being lazy. And there are some things that we can do as recreation on the Sabbath. You know, it was Friday night. I was exhausted. I'd been up early, working hard all day, and my parents came in town, and I'm dragging, and they said, hey, I said, hey, you want some stuff out of our garden? And they said, sure. So I went out to the garden, I picked a bunch of stuff, and I just talked with my parents in the garden, and I was walking through the garden and showing them this and that. You know, by the time they left, I was wide awake and rested. That was recreational. That was walking in the garden in the cool of the day with my parents and talking about things, and that totally rejuvenated me. I could have gone inside and tried to watch TV, and I wouldn't have had the same effect, right? So when we feed the flesh, when we just entertain, when we put a Band-Aid over our laziness and we have this escapism entertainment, we feed the flesh grows stronger, and we become lazier. But when we have recreation or recreation, and we feed the Spirit, we're spending time with the Lord, we're serving each other and loving our families, then the Spirit becomes stronger, the flesh becomes weaker, and we have energy to go and serve the Lord and be more productive in our work all week. Remember this, though, with the Sabbath. It says Jesus said, oh, and by the way, here's a simple way to think about it, before I stop that. What do I do in the Sabbath? Well, you need to sit down and figure out, for me, what is work? For me, what is work? And then whatever work is, don't do that. And then you say, for me, what brings me closer to the Lord, honestly, and closer to my family? And let's do that. And let's let the gray area be what it is. If it ends up happening, that's fine. So for you, if working in your garden or going for a walk, if you have a desk job where you sit down all week and you want to go for a walk or take a canoeing trip with your family or go and work around in the garden and that's what's stressful for you, great. If you work all day, hard all week, you have a very physical job and you find it more restful to have some coffee and to listen to some worship music and to talk to your kids about their week and play some board games and go to the beach and relax, great. That's what Sabbath is for you. We can't be legalistic here. But I do want to give you a word of caution. Don't allow your hobbies to become an idol on the Sabbath. Don't allow the Sabbath to be a day of excuse to idolize your hobbies. For me, I do find it very restful to hunt and to fish. But I don't do that on the Sabbath. Because for me, that would be idolizing it over the Lord. And you need to be honest with yourself and say, am I using this as an excuse? Oh, I'm really close to God when I'm fishing. That can be true or it can be an excuse. So you just got to figure out for yourself what that means. And remember that Jesus says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. If you're exhausted trying to figure out what to do on your Sabbath day, you're doing it wrong, right? You're there, the Sabbath was made for man. It's there to be a blessing to you, to bring you closer to God, to help you bring you closer to your family, and rejuvenate you for the week. And remember this, we don't preserve the Sabbath preserves us. That was the problem with the Hebrew people. That's where they got it backwards. They said, I got to work hard, and we got to make sure that the Sabbath is this holy day. We got to beat people with big sticks if they don't do it right. We got to yell at stores that are open on Sunday, and we got to maintain this way of life, and that's not our job. Our job is to be blessed by the Sabbath. We don't preserve the Sabbath preserves us. And it is for us what God will have it be if we are if we're open and honest. Remember the story in Matthew 12? I'm just going to summarize this. Jesus is there on the Sabbath. There's this guy with a withered hand, and he heals him, and they get a little upset, and they're kind of worried about he's working on the Sabbath. That would be hard, and he says, which one of you, if he had a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, would not take hold of it and pull it out? How much more valuable are men than sheep? So he's talking about taking care of people, and he says, it is then lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Based on that verse, I know people who make it their goal on the Sabbath to go find someone who maybe is a shut-in, doesn't get very many visitors. So we're going to stop in and we're going to sit down as a family with them for a half an hour, and we're going to talk to them on the Sabbath. Or we're going to go over and we're going to love on this person. We're going to drop some groceries off at this family's house. It is possible to be rejuvenated by doing good. And maybe for you that's not going and working in someone's lawn all day. Or maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe you've been sitting down at a desk all week and you get to go out and you get to bless someone and mow their lawn and weed their garden and you know they can't get to it, and that's rejuvenation by doing good. It's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Or maybe it's more sitting down with that person, having a cup of coffee and listening to them tell story after story about when they were your age. And maybe that's being rejuvenated on the Sabbath. It's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Don't be weary in doing good. Here at the end, I want to talk about just some tips about daily stopping. Daily stopping. We are commanded 1 and 7 to stop daily, or to stop weekly, but Jesus stopped daily as well and connected with the Lord. And here's something you can do at the end of your week on the Sabbath, or something you can do at the end of your day. Stop and consider what went well today or this week. What did I do well? What went poorly today or this week? Do I need to mend any relationships from the happenings of today or this past week? Do I need to do anything differently? If something went poorly, how can I do that better next time? Think and examine, right? The unexamined life isn't worth living, right? So what can I do differently next time? And then thank God and ask him for help. It's another thing your Sabbath might look like, right? Step back and get perspective on life. Because sometimes when our head is down, it's easy to notice this coworker who's constantly doing this, and this boss is constantly doing that. We can take a day to step back and say, Lord, what could I do differently? What could I do better? How could I mend relationships? And then watch the Lord bless that. So I want to encourage you, for the next 6 days, put your head down and work hard. 6 days, work. Do your labor. Honor God through your work. Be an example for him in your workplace. Work 2 jobs if you have to get out of debt. Do all those things the Bible said. But don't forget that 1 in 7, rest. And rest well. When you work, work. When you rest, rest. Don't try to mix the two. That's a problem in our culture. That's what causes laziness. Follow the pattern that God made you. Don't be that dull chainsaw, spending 5 times as long cutting down a tree because you won't take 10 minutes to sharpen your saw. Take some time, whether it's on Sundays or Wednesdays or whenever, and rest. For those of you who couldn't be here this morning, who are watching online, we all know, right, that watching something online doesn't actually replace being there in person. And so we miss you guys. We want to encourage you to be a part of the worship here and be a part of the Spirit of God coming and a fellowship with others on the Sabbath day. So let me pray for you guys. Father, it is a bold thing in this culture to stop because we think we keep the world turning. I pray that you would give us the courage to stop, to not worry about what other people would think, judging us for being lazy, what our boss would think about saying, no, I'm not going to work that day. I need a day to be with my family and to rest. Lord, I pray that we would have the courage to say that we are made a certain way by you that is fragile and weak and limited, and we need sleep every night, and we need rest once a week. You designed that from creation, not as a law or as a burden, but as a principle and as as wisdom looking at the creator of the universe. Lord, I pray that you would ingrain that on our heart. Father, I pray that as we Sabbath, that it would be unto you, and that we would get to know you better, and that we would see productivity in the workplace go up, our attitudes towards our families get better, our relationships get better, our sanctification get better, because when we're tired, we don't sin as much. Pray that we would draw closer to you. And I pray that vacations and trips to amusement parks, that work, that hobbies wouldn't get in the way of that, Lord. Father, I pray that you would speak loudly through us to our culture, because peace is very, very rare. I pray that we would be people of peace as we rest in you, and that other people would see that, how you are the center of our lives. We rest with you every day. We rest with you once a week. You give us peace, that they would fix their eyes on you as well and receive that peace. Then pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.